election season, the North Pacific's Ministry of Radio is sponsoring a series of voice chat and text-based town halls for each candidate. We hope this event is informative, and we encourage you to participate by posting questions in the chat. Now let's get started. Welcome to the show, Brendog.
Hello.
I'd like to dive straight into things. So, we only have a limited amount of time, so first and foremost, can you give us a brief history of your time in the North Pacific, including each of the positions you formerly held in our government?
So I was founded in the North Pacific in November 2017. I obviously joined citizenship and joined most of the ministries, starting with defense back in 2017, and over the course of 2 to 3 months, I joined every other ministry. I joined the MPA. I did a bunch of MPA operations, and then I did my first Deputy Minister of Home Affairs in...
I can't hear you. I think you may have broken
Yes,
up.
I need to check my profile because I don't remember anything from 3 years ago.
Well, don't make it super detailed if you don't have to. Just give us a brief history, like hit the core points.
I was a bunch of deputy ministers for like Home Affairs and communications for a while, and then I believe I was firstly Minister of Home Affairs sometime in 2018, most likely.
Okay, yeah, and you're currently Minister of Home Affairs again, right?
3 years later, or 2 years later, I'm Minister of Home Affairs once again.
Alright, so could you talk a little bit about why you decided to run for the delegacy now, and what you think you bring to the office?
So I decided to run for delegacy now because I've always been saying since a year ago that I should run for delegacy sometime in 2019, and I pushed it back to 2020. So I guess this is one of the perfect times with Mac Macedonia having his term limited 2 times. So I guess this was the perfect time for a wide open field of candidates, and I decided that I should put my hat in the ring. My hat in the ring. So I bring a lot of experience in terms of executive staff. Obviously, I'm Minister of Home Affairs, as said earlier, also communication. I bring a wealth of knowledge and experience of how executive has run and how it should be improved, in my opinion.
Alright, so let's get into that a little bit. Can you give me a brief summary of the core points of your campaign? Specifically, what sets your campaign apart from the others?
So my 2 main themes for this campaign is consolidation and collaboration. So what I basically want to do is consolidate on what we already have. We want to update our old dispatches like the TMP handbook. We want to continue our current programs and get those finished. I also want to collaborate between ministries, so we can see that we can possibly have a joint radio/home affairs tutorial series. We can see a culture/radio/university RP event. We can combine all our ministries together and get a TMP event with other regions. So I want to see most of our ministries be active again, mostly because that they need to be, and that it will help in collaborating between ministries and between other parts of TMP.
Those are definitely lofty campaign goals, specifically regarding your idea to have executive staff, ministries participate with one another and work together to achieve common goals, like you mentioned with radio boosting the public outreach of other ministries. The big problem, I guess, with this, and the reason why I think previous administrations have had trouble with that in the past, is simply because the executive staff often suffers from like a high turnover rate or a shortage of staff. And so I was wondering how you would work with your ministers to build up a core staff that is capable of meeting the government's needs, but also how would you boost recruitment and training of new staff members to make sure that we have fresh blood coming into the system?
Well, obviously Home Affairs plays a crucial role in terms of the recruitment lists and mentoring. So obviously that needs to be pushed up to another level in terms of getting more people into Home Affairs first before we get those people spread out in other ministries. I also want to see that we can release more targeted telegrams in terms of API telegrams, so that we don't have to focus our recruitments on stuff like the Drew influx, where we can just send an automated API telegram that is also personalized to a lot of nations at once, and focus more of our recruitments to executive staff, to RP, to the Discord server. I also want to see that even if you're in ministry, you don't have to always, like, we can have more people in different ministries and they can spread their times around instead of focusing workload on one single ministry and getting that ministry overloaded. We can spread that workload around, and having staff in specific ministries or even in all the ministries would be great.
So, I'm trying to think of a good question here to follow up on that. Okay, here's what I was thinking about that. So, given that there's one of these problems with getting new recruits into the ministries doesn't just stop with home affairs, because home affairs can send as many lists as they want, but there's at some point there's typically like a saturation point. And I also think that when you get new nations into the executive staff, there's not a ton of tasks that new players can really do to get their feet wet in a given ministry and then become more experienced over time. Is there anything you would do to sort of change that paradigm in order to make it so that it's easier for newcomers to become more involved?
I like more discussions to be held in various ministries that kind of help newer players as well as help other players join other ministries. I think that we currently just have a thing that we just work and just do these tasks without seeing what other people think about them or seeing what newer players think about them. And I would like to see more discussion of just like, how do I do this, or what would help me do this task in the Discord, because I feel like we can utilize Discord in the executive server more to do with discussions of, can someone help me do this particular task, or hey, how to do this, or do you have improvement to do this? And I think that would help. We do see that in culture or in WAFs, but I feel like we could expand that to all other ministries.
Could you discuss your leadership style a little bit? In other words, to what extent would you direct activity within each ministry to make sure that your campaign goals are met?
I would mostly, I would do half-half. I would leave it to my ministries to run the daily tasks, like for example, mentoring or recruitment home affairs, IVFs in WAFs, stuff like that, TNS in communications, and I would personally focus myself and try to into the projects that I have wanted to do, and I will try to get my ministers to do that. So I would say that most of my leadership style would be focusing on what needs to be done in my platform and letting the ministers do the job day to day.
So how will your administration try to improve the life for each of our regional communities? So we've already discussed a little bit about improving access for executive staffers so that they can participate better. But I'm also wondering, how would you have an impact on the NPA or our peers or even our game side RMBers?
I'll just go in order, in a non-standard order.
Yeah,
so RP, obviously we have culture, and obviously there's a strong RMB scene. I would like to see culture collaborate with both RMB and the Eris side, firm side RP people to get a 2020 RP symposium. Also, we would like to see the RP dispatch along with the TMP handbook being updated for this future and like this year, because I believe that's at least a year old. in terms of R&B/GAs, I would like to see a more consistent approach in how we deal with recruitment and spammers. I would also like to see how we can get the GAs more focused to running more polls in the game side and R&B and getting more people from Discord or the forum to participate in said polls. We would like to see more connection between the R&B side/game side and forum side. In terms of the MPA, I know they've done very well with what they currently have, and I don't think we need to change it that much. I would like to see just MPA in general, and seeing how we can use cards previously and future programs to incentivize more people to join the MPA, rather than just sticking a WA on the TMP main nation and letting that grow, especially if they don't know what the MPA does or how it works.
Those are good answers. Thank you for your time on that. You mentioned having a 2020 RP symposium. Would that be something like what we've had in the past with Greater Dienstad? Would we partner with another region to sponsor that, or would it be sort of just a TNP type thing?
It'll be more like a TMP type thing, because I do want to use that RP symposium to try and create examples in the roleplay dispatch and update the roleplay dispatch via the hype through that event.
So I'm definitely hoping that we see more audience submitted questions, because that's part of why we're here, to get people more informed. So if you're listening in, please consider posting a question in the Agora text to make sure that your voice gets heard. And again, make sure to ping me on that. In the meantime, I do have some additional questions that I have from the Ministry of Radio staff. So these may not be nearly as structured as what we just had, but I'd like to continue with those. So without further ado, so there's I'm sort of wondering what your opinion is on projects that depend on the activity of just one person or a small group of people. What is your opinion on having unsustainable projects being walked back? What would be your policy on that during your term?
Most likely, I want to see our current projects try to get finished, or if they aren't.
All right, we have a question from the Agora text. Here we go. Vivanko's asking you what your opinion is of the Agora Act. Would you care to give your thoughts on that? We can't hear you, Rocketdog. I'm not sure if you're trying to talk.
Give me a second.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Sorry, I'm back. What was the question?
So Vivanko is wondering what your thoughts are on the Agora Act.
I haven't seen the Agora Act in a long time, but from memory, it was the AG decision to cancel, wasn't it? To
Yes,
delete the
that's
AG vote.
That's right.
Kind of supported the Agora Act because I saw that the AG was a position of kind of mostly inactivity, but I do understand that the role of the AG in some form is needed, as the government does need a representative to prosecute offenders through its laws, and I support somehow a kind of appointed AG from time to time, rather than having an AG election cycle.
All right, Cosmo is asking what your opinion is on the recent events surrounding the resolution Repeal Reproductive Freedoms. Is this type of activity something the NPA should continue?
I'm assuming they're talking about that kind of the MPA raids, or not raids, the MPA unendorsing or like raiding nations to let them unendorse the
Yeah, I believe so.
resolution. And so I see that as a way, obviously, that something that is an option to us, but we shouldn't exercise it unless needed. And I think in this case that it is needed just because of other people trying to do it first, and this is like our retaliation. So it should be an option that is there, but should not be done first, and other options should be done first before we use this, what would I say, kind of aggressive and option of WA blocking.
Pierce is asking what your approach would be to CCD. Would you follow the strategy that McMacedonia has followed, or would you do something different?
I would follow what McMacedonia has done, and I would continue, and I will try and get more people, including myself. I'm actually in the CCD Discord just to check in and see what they're kind of doing, but not engaging them directly.
What's one thing that you like about each of the other candidates in this race?
Pry would be his sense of community and his origins from RP, which I think provides a unique perspective in how the government should be run. Praetor, he's obviously someone I look up to. He has some experience in TMP that's been here for a very long time, just like me. I like how he has an analytical way of thinking of how the legacy and executive should run for his intervention with cards. Garundu has a perspective of the new player, which I do like because it shows how we could adjust how we think into executive to newer players. Any other candidates that I did miss?
Do you have anything to think about Maul or Queen Yuno?
No, I don't have any idea because I have no clue because she hasn't really done the election platform yet. More's just more, so how we go.
Yeah, they appear to both be running joke campaigns, but I don't want to put words in their mouth. Alright, I'm going to skip the order on the questions here a little bit, just because I think the next one makes more sense. Given that we were just speaking about other candidates, Cosmo is asking that Pridania and Praetor have released a list of potential cabinet members for their administrations. So while these lists are obviously not final, would you have any names in mind for each of your ministers should you be elected?
I do, so I'll start with Home Affairs because that's my ministry. Obviously, one of my deputies, Nim, or end up 9003, should become minister. If I do want someone more experienced, it would be Saral or Ghost/Paleo. For communications, I would like to see the continuation, not the continuation, sorry. I'd like to see a newer person in communications, so maybe Barbarino, Dretton, or even you, LPG Grande. For radio, I would like to see Garundu, McMacedonia, I think would be good, and maybe even Vivianco, actually. For WA affairs, it would be Plums, Garundu, or any current WA deputy. Missing, let's see. Foreign affairs, Paleo, Praetor, any senior diplomat, or even someone like Paleo, Macedonia.
You've mentioned Ghost twice for foreign affairs. That must be a high endorsement.
Culture, we'll see. Pride would obviously be a good one. Even someone like I don't think of names here for culture. Any other player like Mad Jack, even though I know he's probably going to speaker, or even someone like a new player could be done in culture. I don't think I missed any other ministries.
That's on you. I've been paying attention to your nominations, so I hope you didn't miss any. Vivanko's asking what your overall plans for foreign affairs are. I know this is already covered in your platform, but if you could sort of detail that a little bit further here.
Honestly, foreign affairs has kind of been, I wouldn't say inactive, but on a stall for a long time, starting, I guess, this time last year. So I just want to create a community where we can discuss what diplomatic things are happening, get more members in, and get a sense of stability of a set of ambassadors that can be rotated around frequently. Also, I would like to see how the minister and I can discuss what the diplomatic policy of other regions, or even what regions are doing, how that affects us, and how we can discuss that with new ambassadors to get their sense of how diplomacy in TMP should be run.
Would you have any ways of making foreign affairs more interesting for newer players who may not yet be a diplomat abroad? And secondly, would you consider continuing the World Factbook project that McMasterdonia pioneered?
Yes, on the World Factbook project, I want to see that continue and actually get finished. What was the first question?
The first question was, how would you go about making foreign affairs more interesting for newcomers, specifically ones that don't have an ambassadorship yet?
I think there's kind of two ways to do that. One would be getting kind of a tutorial program up to kind of get them to learn the basics, get them to ask questions, to get them into the ministry. I would say cards as a way to get them into all ministries, but specifically foreign affairs, as well as promoting foreign affairs. I don't think foreign affairs has enough love when it comes to be promoted through any of our channels.
Cosmo is asking what your plan would be going forward with Heroes of the North. Could you talk about that a little bit?
So obviously, as I said, mainly my platform, I want all current projects to continue. So I would definitely want to try to get Heroes of the North to continue throughout my term. I know there are some resolutions being written. I would like to see maybe if we can recruit other authors from TMP, some people who just want to write a resolution but don't know how to, into this, as well as possibly if resolutions aren't going that well, getting writers from other regions to do so.
To that note, actually, I noticed a little while ago that the only guide that we have on the World Assembly as a whole is probably still Mouse Bumble's WA 101 series. I was wondering, because that's a little bit out of date, would you be interested in sort of like commissioning a new guide for that?
Yes, I kind of want to do a lot of new guides / tutorials for many of the ministries. Just a general guide on what to do, how to do, and how to start in each ministry, if they're kind of old.
Vivanko's asking what your thoughts are on joke campaigns as a whole.
I like them because they are a good sign of just to lighten up what elections can sometimes tend to be serious. So joke campaigns are good. Obviously there needs to be kind of a balance between joke campaigns and serious campaigns, and that I feel like that in TMP that balance is.
So while we were talking about your potential nominations for different ministries, you mentioned both the Ministry of Comms and the Ministry of Radio. Given that during McMasterdonia's first term he separated comms from radio, would you continue to go along with that and keep the two ministries separated? And do you agree with that decision?
I do agree with that decision, and I will keep them separated because I believe that MBS has outgrown what is communications. communications to me is what we communicate mostly to the world. And while MBS is a part of that, I'd like to see radio be more of MBS plus videos. So it doesn't necessarily have to all be about MBS. So radio can do chats like this one, this town hall, or even tutorial videos. And I think combining both what radio does and what communication does and what the goals I have for them into one ministry would just be too large.
Specifically talking about NBS, I know that you've already mentioned having some cooperation between the Ministry of Radio and other ministries, but I was wondering what your thoughts are on potential collaboration between NBS and foreign Ministry of Radios as well. I'm talking specifically about Europea's Ministry of Radio, something like NS Today, or even the up-and-coming TEP TV.
I definitely think that like either guest episodes with each other, or even a joint episode with something with other regions, radio ministries, would be a good way to expose us to the world and them to us, to learn other techniques that we can use or they can use in creating new interviews and radio for both the general NS population as well as our own TMP population.
So I'm looking at your campaign thread right now, and under communications, you have mentioned that you want to make the Northern Lights a more frequent publication while still maintaining the high quality magazine style articles. If you review sort of the history on TNL over the last few terms, you'll see that it's actually dropped behind its fellow publication TNS by quite a ways, in that we haven't seen a new TNL publication in quite some time. Making TNL not only more frequent, but keeping that high standard of quality is something that's going to be very challenging for your administration to achieve. Do you have any plans for how you would do that?
I think, as I said in my platform, I want to try and maintain the high quality, but if we want to have more frequent publications, I can see the need for us to fall back to a text-based version. So what I want to try to do with TNL is create a list of articles that doesn't have to be in relation to each other. So it could be 2 or 3 articles, one about MPA, one about, let's say WA, and one about the TMP. There doesn't need to be a theme in I believe, in a TNL issue. I just want more articles out in general. So if we need to, we can kind of fall back to the text-based version that was in the original TNL, but I obviously want to keep with that more high-quality image style publication.
Cosmo's asking, will you continue the sponsorship program for WA proposals? Would you commit yourself to follow the forum vote on WA proposals as well?
Definitely continue the sponsorship program. I think that's a good way for newer writers to get a proposal in, to get that reviewed and drafted, and a way for them to get a WA proposal that is good into the WA. Also, it gives them a sense of confidence in joining the WA. I will commit myself to following the forum vote on definitely on the definite GA side, most likely on the Security Council side. I do have some questions about some of the resolutions, as we've seen some kind of joke resolutions in there. So I will try to commit myself to following the forum vote, but if something doesn't kind of line up to what TMP holds in general, I will kind of not follow the forum vote, but in general I will.
Speaking about the World Assembly, Formiar is asking if you would be available to stomp and stack on proposals, and if that's something that you find important.
I think stacking proposals is kind of important, but I want to do it in moderation. I don't want to us or war to stack every proposal. I don't think that's fair on the rest of the NS population. So, yes, but not really. Yeah.
That's an interesting perspective. What's your opinion on wall?
War is definitely a good way to see the North Pacific's interests in the WA combined with our fellow regions. So yes, I do like war. I think it's a good way for us to see what we can achieve and what our war partnered regions can achieve in the WA.
Boromir is also asking, back to our discussion about the Northern Lights issues, what would your ideal TNL look like in terms of the articles, the quantity of them in each issue, and where we're sourcing them from, as well as like the frequency? You said you want to make them more frequent, but does that mean, once in a term or 4 times in a term? What are we talking about?
So articles would minimum be 3, I'd say, every 2 months, so twice a term. And kind of them having at least 2 articles, I would say, sourced from TMP. Any other additional writers from outside NS would be obviously welcomed, and they could write articles about almost anything to a high quality.
It looks like your position on stomping and stacking in the WA is a bit controversial. As you know, when stomping and stacking occurs, it gives the North Pacific a bit more voice in the WA, just because there's so many. It's the lemming effect, essentially. And I guess I'd ask, if we weren't going to do that, I still think that other regions would. While I think your heart is in the right place, don't you think that would just diminish TNP's voice without really fixing the problem?
I can see that, and I think stomping and stacking is important, and we should do it on many proposals, but I don't think all of them is what I'm trying to say. So if it's a proposal that we don't really have an opinion on, or in general, if the WA doesn't have a real opinion on, then maybe not, but most likely.
Okay, so it just depends on sort of the strength of our conviction on a given proposal. So
Yes.
if we have an established position on a proposal, then we can go ahead and do that. But if it's pretty close, or if it's not an important issue to the WA, then it's just not essential, and we should let the WA vote the way that they are going to vote without stomping or stacking.
Yeah.
As far as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is concerned, do you find there to be a need to restructure the diplomatic corps at all? And what are your thoughts on creating a separate level of embassy, sort of like a consulate, for smaller regions who are looking to build up their relationship with us before moving into being a full-fledged embassy?
Definitely like the idea of consulates, and that would obviously help us with the UCR regions that kind of have a small population that we kind of need to help with regional development. That's something that I would definitely consider, and I will try and implement if possible. To see about the high-ups of foreign affairs. It's kind of, I think it's kind of stale. We got a lot of old members in there, and we need to train a new generation of diplomats to kind of push it back up. So I don't think it necessarily needs to be restructured. I just think we just need more newer members in there, and that's something that obviously takes more than one term.
What would you see as the functional difference between a consulate and an embassy in your implementation?
A embassy is something we have established diplomatic relation, so we have an embassy with them, they have an embassy with us. In a consulate, I would see that as a more one-way thing. So they kind of consulate with us, but we don't necessarily send an ambassador or a consulate general there. So it's kind of more a one-way thing, but we will definitely help in terms of a consulate.
Cosmo's asking a little bit about just sort of all the qualifiers that you're putting on your policy positions. He says he's hearing a lot of probably, maybe in some cases on a lot of the different answers that perhaps provide a little bit of nuance, but also make him a little bit concerned. He says he brings this up because the delegacy can bring up a lot of stressful situations and tough decisions. Do you believe you would be able to make difficult decisions, even if they weren't popular, for the betterment of the region?
I keep saying maybe and probably because it always depends on the situation. And I've done some of these in a more TMP style case. So I have made some decisions that aren't for a said ministry. So I believe I can do that for the whole region. Obviously, it weighs a lot more in terms of how it affects TMP and the NS. But even if it doesn't see me elected on a term, I would definitely like to see my decisions benefit the region whilst then before benefiting me.
Can you discuss a little bit about what that decision-making process looks like? Do you have advisors that you're going to rely on for advice? Are you going to bring in people and listen to what they have to say? Or are you going to sort of just make the decisions on your own based on gut feeling or instinct or something like that? And go into detail if you could.
So I think both in terms of advisors, but ultimately my gut feeling. So I want advisors to provide the context behind what the situation, what the decision has, what the positive is, and the negatives to what the decision will do, as well as what prompted the decision. But ultimately, I think I will decide upon why I should say yes or no to said decision. So, for example, if it's something that affects the security of the region, I will probably call in the vice delegate, maybe some security councillors to see what they think about it. I would call upon the offending party, see why they did it, and ultimately make my decision based on how it affects TMP.
Robespierre has a question here. Given your previous response on the diplomatic board question, do you feel as though you'd be responsible for the training of the next generation of ambassadors should you be elected delegate? And if so, what does that look like, and how can we polish our skills as diplomats?
I don't think that's necessarily under my delegacy. Obviously, I'll be at the start of it, and I think that's definitely important, and I'd like to see future delegates do the same as well. So I'll be responsible for the start of it, but future delegates will see the full transition. In terms of how it polishes our skill, by discussing on what older or more experienced diplomats have done, we can kind of help what newer diplomats are doing, as well as providing a sense or like a round of discussion between these two people. I believe that a lot of the senior diplomats just don't discuss what they do, and even what the ministry or the minister itself doesn't discuss what it does with newer diplomats. And I think we need to provide some sort of connection between staff and the minister and senior diplomats.
Speaking of advice, as we were just speaking about, let me rephrase. Speaking of advice, would you appoint a chief of staff, much like McMasterdonia did in one of his terms? If so, would that role of a chief of staff be in your administration, and who would you have in mind for it if you were to go that route?
I think I might appoint a chief of staff, but it won't be a staff term. I think as a role, the chief of staff, in my opinion, will be someone who kind of manages all the ministries when I don't have time. So if I don't have enough time, like a month or two, or like a month into my delegacy, I may appoint a chief of staff. So if I do appoint a chief of staff, it'll be someone who has a broad range of experience throughout most ministries, and that's someone who was either a former delegate or someone that has been a minister of a few other ministries that I don't have much experience in.
All right. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap this up? Any final statement that you'd like to say?
I can see Cosmo's question about lack of time, so I'll quickly answer that before I'll do my final statements. Definitely not, but I'm saying in terms of like a few weeks, maybe like a week or two, that I have a lot of real life affairs that need to be done that week. Maybe I would appoint a chief of staff for the rest of the term, but it wouldn't be a lack of time in the whole delegacy.
All right, and then for that final statement, if you wanted to put anything in.
Final statement is hope. Obviously, my platform is kind of more ambitious, but I have tried to tone it down in terms of getting what we need set up in terms of having our ministries just finish off what they've done in the past few terms, update all the old handbooks before moving on into what I see as more collaboration of ministries and trying to get a sense of how we can do work as executive throughout all ministries instead of relying on one ministry and overloading that. So
right.
I hope to I hope that you'll vote for me for what I believe the executive should become.
All right, everyone, thanks for coming. I hope this town hall answered some of your questions about Rocketdog's campaign and will help prepare you for the election to come. Thanks for your flexibility on such a short notice as well, Rocketdog. I know we only started planning this less than 24 hours ago, so thank you for that.
No worries. I'm always happy to talk.
All right, enjoy your evening. Thanks for coming.